to the Laramie City Council work session, Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. And I will begin the evening with public comment on non-agenda items. Yes, sir. Mr. Henderson. Hershey.
Ryan
Sorry.
Hershey,
yes, Ryan.
Mayor, council members, thanks for listening tonight. Thank you. All right. Okay, Ryan Hershey. I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about the, what was that we called that thing? The surface, surface water drainage fee. I've been looking for where to find the appeal online. It doesn't exist right now. Also, there's no information on where I can view the data of my property. I'd like to file an appeal, but there is nothing in place. In 13.80.070 of that ordinance, it prescribes a feature for an appeal for this tax. It hasn't been implemented. This tax is due to take effect on July 1st to start. That's not enough time. You guys, the procedures that were outlined in that ordinance are not done. We don't have enough time for thousands of community members to file an appeal before this tax takes place. I don't think that we should have to file an appeal after it takes place either, because then you're doing a refund, and that's my money. You don't get to hold on to my money for no reason, you know. That's the main thing that I came down here to talk to you about. I feel that tax is unfair to begin with. My street, my neighborhood doesn't even have any storm drains, but yet I'm still going to get taxed. I do want to see something happen immediately on this, because I've been waiting for months. I've been checking periodically and can't find anything. The one other thing I'd like to speak to you tonight about is downtown parking. We could really use multiple times daily enforcement with the construction currently going on. We're having a lot of the business owners just pile up on that 2nd to 3rd Grand Street there and all the other areas. With a good section of our downtown parking gone right now with the construction, we need multiple daily, routes by the police just to keep it maintained. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time tonight, and that's all.
Thank you, Ryan. We appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Our first work session is budget overview, and I would assume City Manager Jordan and Director Wade.
Good evening, Council.
Your mic.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. So we are looking forward to talking to you tonight in the first of our series of work sessions with respect to the supplemental budget for the second year of the fiscal biennium. What you can expect tonight is really just an overview of a bunch of basic principles and terminology just to orient everybody to our budget processes and some concepts around budgeting. So nothing really in detail tonight. And as you know, you do not have your budget workbook. And this is a purposeful scheduling issue where recognizing that about half of our city council are kind of brand new to this process and to municipal budgeting, and half are not. We wanted to sort of level the playing field of knowledge and bring everybody hopefully up to speed this evening. You can expect to receive your budget document here in the next week or two, is it, Jen?
It's the end of the month.
Thank you. End of the month. So this is really preparatory work that we're doing leading up to your review of the supplemental budget recommendation. So, great. Thank you. For tonight, here's our agenda. We have about 6 or 7 sections we wanted to cover with you. I'll let you know, we'll try to keep the clip and pace of this pretty aggressive, but if it's too aggressive and you want us to slow down, define a term, something like that, please feel free to interrupt myself, and I know Director Wade would welcome that interruption as well. Part of the reason we want to keep the pace pretty aggressive is because, of course, you have a second work session after this introductory material on budget. Okay, so I'm going to dive right in if you don't have any questions. Yeah, we're going to talk about just some budgeting principles, and I thought that this might be useful for many of you because I know you have backgrounds, many of you as well, in private budgeting or private business, as well as some nonprofit folks in this room, in our cohort here. So I'm going to talk about some of the differences and maybe some of the terminology and how it differs between private and public budgeting. So when you look at a municipal corporation, which under Wyoming state statute, the city of Laramie is a municipal corporation, and you compare it to private corporations, the obvious differences exist with respect to mission and or motive, if you will. Oops, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Generating value, of course, is what a municipal corporation tries to do, and that's different from what we perceive in private business in the respect that they are trying to generate profit. We share the same sort of mission and motive around practicing our operations in a lawful and ethical way. I think private and municipal corporations strive for sustainability. I will say, too, this isn't textbook. This is sort of my opinion that I've arrived at after many years, having come from the private sector and private business and moved into public sector and public business. So if you want to take issue with any of my suppositions, I certainly welcome those different points of view. Lastly, of these four, I think for municipal corporations, we're trying to create value for all people, and in a private corporation, the motive is more to create profit for shareholders or value for shareholders. So then when we kind of unpack what are the deliverables that a municipality is trying to achieve as opposed to a private business, for this municipality, and in all respects this presentation looks at Laramie specifically as a municipality. As you know, this municipality engages in the delivery of private goods and also public goods. Private goods, to differentiate those, if it's been a while since your economics class, those are the things that we do with respect to water, sewer, solid waste, and pest control. So mosquito control could be considered a private good. Public goods that we deliver are those things that really are not severable. If you think back to that economic theory, they're things that you can't deliver in discrete quantities. I'll use Councillor Lockhart as an example. Your coffee that you serve in your business cannot be severable, right? Like you cannot divvy that coffee up if you had to share it equally with all people, right? So it's a discrete good. And so that's what makes that good a private good as compared to public goods like policing services, right? You cannot apportion out, one police officer per person or something. We're all sharing that resource as a public good, like we do for fire EMS, parks, roads, community development and planning services would be another example, as well as, I actually looked this up last week. I asked, is the economic development services the city provides considered a private good or a public good? I thought they were kind of in the middle. And at least according to Google AI, they are firmly a private good that we provide as a municipal corporation. I thought that was interesting. The deliverable, of course, for a private company is a private good. Moving on, comparing the two, when we look at financing strategies, this is where things start to look very similar. We use private tools to deliver our private goods of water, sewer, et cetera, and through assessing user fees, no different than maybe Councillor Lockhart charges $3 or $4 for a cup of coffee, right? Public tools that we use for financing our public goods include property taxes and our local option sales taxes, our 5th and 6th penny. As you know, we're also shared with the state of Wyoming in the 4-cent state sales and use tax. And then also we look, and this is an interesting point that some of you may refute, but I do believe after kind of bridging both sectors, cities like private corporations strive to figure out how we reinvest our gains. And you might ask, what are the gains? Well, in a private sector business, I think the gains are that that profit at the end of the year that is in excess of your expenses. In the public sector, here at the city, we strive to maximize our budget. And really, for all of you, when you think about the policy goals that you establish each year, those are oftentimes in excess of the basic services and goods that we are obliged to provide as a municipality. So you may have a policy objective for environmental sustainability. We will maximize the budget in order to try to provide our basic goods and services at the least possible cost to free up resources to fund the policy objectives of the City Council that you bring forward after speaking with your constituents. So we maximize the budget to find space for those quality of life policy priorities. Some of them are also quantity of life, frankly, policy priorities that the City Council has. And then kind of wrapping up this comparison section, when you look at the challenges that a municipal corporation versus a private corporation face, again, I shared this from my own experience, but for me as a city manager moving into the public sector out of private sector, one of the things I've seen as an issue that maybe I didn't anticipate when I ran my little business or worked for private businesses was the perpetuity of the business cycle. When we look at the goods that we provide, we as a city need to be providing them not just today, not just through our lifetime to maximize our own individual earning potential as a private business owner, but as a city, as a municipal corporation, we have to provide these services to the public in perpetuity across generations and generations and generations. And so that never-ending burden, I guess, poses some unique challenges that I think is a little different than the life cycle of businesses, which certainly can bridge generations and accumulate generational wealth and generational liabilities, but don't always, especially in a smaller business setting and a non-corporate setting. We share volatility in the city side. We are often looking at conflicting or shifting policy priorities coming from the City Council or frankly coming from our residents. What may be important one year may cease to be important next year, and the pandemic certainly taught us some lessons around that. And you'll have to bear with me because I don't know why I'm a little dehydrated, but I did bring my water tonight. On the private business side, volatility often represents the need to innovate, to adapt to changes in the market or customer demands, or maybe facing obsolescence, right? The thing you provide, the widget that you create is no longer needed for some reason, right? We share, I think, the need to provide equitable and fair goods. In the public sector, that's certainly more pressing, but I think for private sector folks, you're looking at supply chain, you're looking at economic factors, you still want to provide those goods. But for us, we're dividing up things that are kind of indivisible and spreading the costs, and so we want to spread those costs fairly, like, for instance, in policing services. We face financial constraints, as do those in private business, trying to seek access to capital. They face taxation, cash flow pressure, so does the city. There is a fluctuation, of course, in our demand for services based on the needs and priorities of the community at any given time. We look at pricing for our private goods, just like a private business does, and you'll hear us refer sometimes to costing, and that's more the government term for costing of public goods, like policing service. What is the cost of policing on a per capita basis? You'll hear us talk about things like that. We share workforce and labor constraints, and while you always hear private business talk about government regulation as a burden and taxation, at least at the municipal government level, as you well know, we also are the recipient of down-flowing, unfunded mandates. That's what we like to call them in the public sector, but they really are government regulations placed on municipalities that accrue from the top, from the federal level, on down to state government. And so every year, for instance, at the end of the legislative session, we're accounting for what unfunded mandates we may need to comply with, but have no funding, similar to a private business. So I'll stop there, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Okay.
Councilor, Councilor O'Doherty.
I wanted to add that the perpetuity of the city, I think it also weighs in when we talk about our investments, that like if I put solar panels on my house, I might not live to reap the return on investment, but the city has been here for 100-some years, and we hope to continue. So I think that's another thing to consider. Thank you, Mayor.
Good point. Okay. With that, so I just want to orient us a little bit to kind of some shared terminology that maybe you bring from your private lives and your private experience, and overlap it with some of the sort of municipal or government-y terms. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Wade, and she's going to pick up the next section, and then I'll jump back up here in a little while.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. So as the City Manager said, the goal of tonight's work session is really to get you ready for the more in-depth work sessions that will come starting in May. And for our new council members, a particular challenge might be that we are in the middle part of a biennium, which means we actually have an adopted budget already for fiscal year 2026, and what the City Manager is recommending to you is a supplemental appropriation in all of our operating funds and an original appropriation in some of our smaller funds. We'll talk more about funds in a minute, but I just want to orient you in that way. And so as you have about a month to get ready for those operating budget work sessions, or those budget work sessions in May, you may find it useful to look at the adopted budget publications that are on our website. And so I want to just show you those briefly. We're going to dive into an entire fund section later in the presentation so you get an understanding of the flow and the cadence and the information you're working with. But the first thing we want to do is show you where you can find the publications. So City Clerk, if you could go to the next slide. And so you can, we'll just actually, if you don't mind clicking on the link, and then we'll go back. So if you click on the link in your presentation today, you will be directed to the city's website, of course, and you will find the adopted capital investment plan for the biennium, as well as the adopted budget book. We do typically publish two documents to support a biennial budget. The adopted capital plan has lots of great detail on every city project that the City Manager has recommended and has been adopted by the previous City Council. The adopted budget, the more comprehensive book, is actually fund by fund summary of the full adopted budget. That's where you're going to find information on total fund revenue, on sustainability analysis, and some of the things that we'll look at a little bit later this evening. That's all I want to tell you for right now. It's a little bit of a teaser, if you will, where we're going to head later on. But now, City Clerk, if you could go back to the presentation. And next slide. We'll talk a little bit about the budget preparation process so that you can understand what's going on behind the scenes before the budget basically lands on you at the end of April. In the first year of a biennium, what you can expect is you'll receive the recommended capital budget at the end of March and the full budget at the end of April. Because this is a supplemental appropriation year, you're receiving one budget document at the very end of April. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some key terms first. One of the things that we have learned from our City Manager's Budget Advisory Committee is how even some of the terms that we throw around as common knowledge maybe are not common knowledge, and that's been great learning for me. And so I want to just take a minute to define some of the terms you'll hear a lot, the first being revenue. And so when we talk about revenue from a budgeting standpoint, it is a real inflow of resources. And so you might even see something like proceeds from debt being accounted for as a resource. And maybe if you have a private business and you use accrual-based accounting, that might seem counterintuitive to you. But when we're talking about a governmental budget, we need to distill these resources down to a dollar that makes sense to our public. And so from a budgeting standpoint, we really are dealing in real resources. The one exception to that is depreciation in our enterprise funds. And I'm not going to talk about that much tonight, but that really is the only exception to that resource measurement that I just talked about. The second concept I want to familiarize you with is the idea of available reserves. And so when we say reserves are available, that would mean cash or other assets that are expected to be available within a one-year term, less any obligations expected to be due within that one-year term. And so when we say these are our available reserves, that's what we mean in terms of budgeting. Very few of our reserves aren't available. It's really those obligations. We do have a couple of investments right now we've been holding since pre-pandemic times when the interest rate environment changed so much. I consider those to be unavailable because we don't want to take a realized loss on them. That's a pretty small amount, but most generally our reserves are available. Personnel expenditures. So when you hear us talk about expenditures, they are not expenses. So from a budgeting standpoint, that term means the resources we're going to actually expend out. Personnel would be costs for all types of personnel-related costs. That's benefited employee wages, non-benefited employee wages, overtime, any variable rate benefits, any fixed cost benefits, employment taxes, and similar items. So comprehensive, that's what's in personnel costs. You can understand how, especially with benefit rates, the costs of personnel, they are a major part of our budget. We'll spend a lot of time there. But I am always amazed at how fast those costs can grow. Operating expenditures, those are ongoing costs of conducting routine operations, including contractual services and operating supplies. Operating costs tend to be the lowest part. They don't tend to be, they are the lowest part of the city's budget. Capital expenditures, on the other hand, are the highest component of the city's budget. And so by sheer dollar, it would be capital expenditures, personnel expenditures, and operating expenditures in terms of where the city expends its resources. Capital expenditures include cost of capital investment, including buildings, vehicles, large equipment items, infrastructure maintenance, major software acquisition, etc. You should know that the city has hundreds of millions in capital assets that we maintain in terms of our infrastructure. You'll see more information on that in your budget book, but it's not a small operation to take care of the city's infrastructure. I also want you to know that capital expenditures are approved as specific purpose budgetary authorizations. And so when you see those capital expenditures in your budget books, if you happen to start preparing, we don't have authorization to spend those on other items than you've approved. The only authorization we would have is to transfer that money to a project that was like in scope for the same function. But you can know that those monies, including the fleet items and the equipment items, are being expended on those specific purpose items. Next slide. You'll hear us talk about sustainability a lot, so I'm going to put in a plug here. We believe in Laramie, and we believe all governments should believe in that way, that the recommended budget should be sustainable over the long term. And so let's talk about what that means. What that means to us is that the combined total of forecasted revenue and available reserves are sufficient to fund total expenditures, that ongoing expenditures are funded with ongoing resources, that one-time amounts are properly excluded from funding operating costs. We want to look at long-term trends, and what you'll see in the budget publications is a 10-year analysis. So you can see by fund how the city is doing, not only for the total cost of government, but for those operating costs, because we all know those operating costs contain our personnel and the things that, unless we contract, we're going to have that obligation into perpetuity to provide those services, unless those services, of course, change significantly or unless the demand changes significantly. We also want to look at whether our funds each have sufficient reserves for capital investment and over what time period. And so for our business type funds, our water, wastewater, solid waste, and soon to be surface water drainage utility, we plan over a 10-year period. And we actually partner with consultants to help make sure our financial plan, the structure of them, is what it needs to look like to conform with industry practices. And then staff take those plans and they work with them and develop rate recommendations for you. In terms of use of reserves, if we're going to use them, in my opinion, and the city manager's opinion, they should be for one-time expenditures for capital investment. Governments do build reserves over time. We certainly have reserves built in the general fund right right now due to those one-time collections from wind energy in the area. And so we believe very strongly that that money should be used for one-time expenses, primarily in capital investment, because it's not expected to be ongoing. And so we'll talk a lot about that, but it's important we get that on your mind first and forefront, and we'll look at some of the resources that will help you evaluate sustainability a little later on. So what I want you to know as you're getting ready for the budget is that how we're developing each of the forecasts for the budget that ends up before you. The city manager is going to talk more about her process, but I'm speaking just at the very highest level. Revenue, we're using actual trends for the past 3 to 5 years. I am forecasting revenue, and what I am attempting to do is get within about 3% of where we expect ongoing revenue to land. I do not want to be 3% over. I want to be about 3% under, but I do not want to be too far under 3% under, because that contracts operating. And so especially, that's typically fairly easy to do. That's been harder to do in sales and use tax. I am continuing to not forecast one-time collections of sales and use tax as a mechanism for funding basic governmental services. So we're excluding those and we're appropriating them. You're being recommended to appropriate them after the fact. Available reserves, what I'm doing is I'm looking at an analysis of our current fund balances, our obligated amounts, and our future reserve requirements. I'm coming up with that amount of available reserves, and the city manager and I are talking about that as she is considering recommending to you the capital appropriation in particular. Personnel expenditures, the budget team, which is in the finance division, is preparing zero-based budgets for all authorized positions, so there's no holding on to funds, and that happens every year of the budget, not just in the first year of the biennium, and so those amounts are reforecasted every year. If you think about that, that may not seem significant, but when you consider the difference in health insurance between a family and a single coverage, which is about $12,000 per employee, it is actually critical that we forecast the personnel budget from a zero-based budget every year and not just allow those funds to build up. Operating expenditures are initially forecast incrementally, which means that directors maintain the existing budget level, and they ask for increases or decreases to that. And you will see both in your budget recommendation this year. And capital expenditures are forecasted using zero-based budgets each year. And so the only type of item on this list that is not forecasted using a zero-based budget technique are our operating expenditures, which is the smallest component of our budget. But it does not always go up, it often will go down, and you'll see some of that in your budget.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And this may be a little bit too in the weeds, so just like pull me out if I get down in there. So thinking about personnel costs and thinking about tariffs and things that are coming into play, how are we looking, I mean, these seem very unrelated, but I'm going to try to pull this all together. So how are we looking at this bigger picture? If the budget, let's say a budget is $100, and typically the department heads would say, okay, 70% of this, $70 of this is going to go to my staff, and I've got $30 for the other. How are we adjusting so that the personnel staff wages are not impacted, or are we, to kind of offset all of this other that we don't really know?
We go back to the previous slide. So each of these items is forecast in isolation.
Okay.
And so the budget team is forecasting personnel expenditures, directors do not.
Okay.
The only thing that directors forecast there are maybe overtime wages, part-time wages, and they exist in a separate pool entirely to avoid that phenomenon. Clearly, when you have a budget that is like 75% wages, you almost have to function in that way, and we need to know what those costs are first, because that can indicate further decisions down the road, because there's such a significant portion of the cost.
Perfect. So you're looking at that as it shows, personnel expenditures completely separately.
Correct.
Making those decisions and then making whatever decisions we need to make based on wild ride that we might go on in the future.
Yeah, our initial assumption in the zero-based budget are that the heads, I believe this is a good time to remind the council that you actually approve authorized positions at the city. So our base assumption is that every year those authorized positions are continuing. That's what we develop the funding estimate of. And if resources are not sufficient, that's when the city manager would begin looking at that from a different angle and recommending to you reductions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director. Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade. My quick question maybe, but the 3% when you're looking at forecasting revenue, where does that come from? You know, I'm sure that that's backed by some sort of number, but I was just curious about why it's 3%, not 5%, why not 1%, but just what that 3% represents.
Councilmember Freed, Mayor, if it's okay. That's just my own personal target. I feel like, especially with the inflationary environment we've been in, we all know whether you're in private sector, public sector, wherever you live, what that pressure has felt like. And so with revenue as a constraining source, just like it is for a private corporation, we need to be within a certain tolerance. And, you know, sometimes it's not 3%. Sometimes I'm off by that. But that is my actual goal, is to be within that 3% mark. It's also about trust building. And so if I am forecasting, if finance officers forecast way too low, and there are some that do, it's really hard to build trust in that environment because you're creating scarcity and resource constraint that just doesn't exist. And so 3% feels good to me. 5% is not bad. 5% is okay with me too, but I prefer it to be 3.
Thank you.
Further comment, questions?
So let's
Seeing none.
talk a little bit about city funds. So this is what I want you to think of. I like this graphic because it's separate jars of money. There's different amounts of money, which is the case in our city funds too, which I like about the visual. But it's money that you might think about as segregated in some way. And in the case of government funds, it's segregated for a specific purpose. And that's really what governmental funds are about. Kind of at the next level, I need to let you know that they are separate and distinct accounting entities. So it's not like they all live in one, they do all live in one bank account in many regards, right? But they're accounted for as completely separate businesses, just like you would account for completely separate businesses in a private sector environment. And so the funds are not commingled. If there's transferring between the funds, you see that. You see it in the budget. We'll spend some time talking about that. And if any fund were to start subsidizing the other through a loan, you would also see that activity because they're separate businesses. That's really what I want you to remember. City Clerk, go to the next slide. So I'll talk to you about this. We'll go to the next one then. So let's talk about our major funds. So major funds, it's where we're going to spend most of the time in our budgeting process. We do have some smaller funds. We will talk about those more in our actual budgeting process. But for tonight, I want to talk with you about these ones. I'm going to talk about the general fund last because I think that's the most effective way to do it. Our capital construction fund, it's actually a capital fund, which is what it sounds like. It is established to account for the cost of major capital projects that span multiple fiscal years. Within a couple of budget cycles, you'll see all of the general government capital move to this fund and out of the general fund, which will just make it easier, I think, in budget conversations and for transparency with the public to know what the city is investing in capital. Right now, we do have money in the general fund for capital investment, and sometimes I think that's a little bit confusing. We are not mandated to do that, but we think it would help community members understand the budget better. The sources of revenue for this fund are grants, loans, and interfund support. It has to be supported by interfund transactions because it creates none of its own revenue, being just a capital fund. Next, let's talk about the 2018 SPT fund. This fund is entirely about resources restricted for completing the voter-approved initiatives from the 2018 specific purpose tax. It's also interest related to anything that we earn on those dollars, and that interest is allocated based on the approved projects, and so everything is proportionately allocated in this fund. And the main funding source is the 2018 specific purpose tax, but we also get grants to help that money go further. The water, wastewater, and solid waste funds are our current enterprise funds, and when you think enterprise funds, think that we are funding those operations primarily with rates that are established in an exchange-like transaction over the long term, although we do get significant grants and loans in these operations that offset the user rate, and frankly, that's our goal, is to make those rates as affordable as possible through the use of those grants and loans. And finally, the general fund. And so the general fund gets a lot of attention. It should get a lot of attention. It's where every other government service that is not accounted for in these other funds is accounted for, and that is where you'll find most of our tax revenue. And so sales and use taxes, except for the 6th cent, property taxes, our share of federal mineral royalties from the state, the direct distribution, mineral royalties, and I just said that. What am I missing? Federal mineral royalties, severance tax. So all of that's going on in the general fund. It is general by nature. And one of the more challenging questions that we sometimes receive is, tell me what my taxes pay for. And if it's an operation in the general fund, that can be a little bit hard to do because those resources are not dedicated to specific purposes. That's why they're in the general fund. So they are considered sources for funding general government operations, and the matter is complicated by the fact that many of our basic governmental services, those public goods that the city manager was talking about earlier, are actually funded in the general fund. So you'll see more of that in the budget process, but that is why the fund rightly gets a lot of attention and is our messiest fund, in my opinion, because there's the most going on there. Yeah.
Councilor Newman.
I can't remember. So the surface water drainage fund.
That is our next slide.
Okay, I'll wait and hold my question.
So introducing the new major fund in 2026. So with the City Council enacting new surface water drainage fees as of July 1st, the city will have a new major fund in 2026. From an accounting standpoint, it's probably not going to qualify in that first year. I'm going to report it that year anyway. We do have a right to do that. So it gets that separate presentation that I think that our community members will really want to see. And so you will begin to see recommended budgetary appropriations for this fund in the budget document that you will receive later this month, and then you'll see that accounting follow it next fiscal year.
Councilor Newman.
Is this an enterprise fund?
It is indeed.
Okay,
Yes.
I thought so. I remember we had discussion back and forth, but I couldn't remember which way it was described, so
Yes.
thank you.
It will, we do have, remember, a budgeted $5 million transfer from the general fund to support the startup cost, and that will happen by the end of this fiscal year. And I believe at this point, I'll take any questions you have, but otherwise I'm going to turn it back over to the city manager.
Thank you, Director Wade. City manager.
So let's talk a little bit about how the recommended budget is developed. So this is more process. We start, let me talk about the timeline, if you think of a calendar year. So we usually start at the end of a calendar year. Internally, departments start working, department directors will start working with their staff to identify their capital needs, to prepare their budget requests. They submit them typically early in the following months of the next calendar year, so January, February. March is kind of a crazy month in my office and for many members of my management team. Not only are we bargaining collectively with our union in March, which, as you all know from the update you recently received, takes, I don't know, I think we sat in meetings for 25 hours in the month of March, but we also sit in about 25 to 30 hours, I do, with each of the departments reviewing their budget requests on an individual level. Because this is a supplemental budget year, I'm only reviewing changes or additions revisions to what, of course, was already adopted last year, so the lift is a little bit lighter. However, when we're preparing the budget recommendation for a full biennium, it's a little bit heavier lift in March, and oftentimes we start even in February doing that work over another maybe 2 weeks, so a 4 to 6 week period. So what I want to tell you is, as I prepare your recommended budget, and of course that is part of my job statutorily, it's part of my contract and requirements that you've set forth for me as well, this is how I think of the budget. It is really the common thread that links all of the administrative business units of this city and our governance objectives. It's the one sort of clearinghouse place where you can really see, here's what the city's up to, here's where their priorities here's where they put their money, that sort of thing. When I talk about administrative business units, one thing that I've always found interesting about managing in the public sector, particularly municipalities, is we really do have independent business units, and they're all very different, right? So it's not like you just have to figure out how to run the police department, right? You have to figure out also how to run a fire department, how to run a parks department, recreation department, understand some basics of accounting, although Jen does a really good job keeping us all up to speed on that. But really, we have a number of discrete business units. Some of them are what I call customer or outward facing, so they're serving the community, parks, recreation, police, fire, economic and community development, but many of our business units are also internal or serving really our internal customers, like human resources department, understanding how that business unit functions to serve the 200 and some employees that we have on a full-time basis and 300 plus when we include our provisional part-time folks. So the budget will take all of those independent business units, whether outward or inward facing. It'll overlay it with your governance objectives, and that's where the meat and potatoes of what we do is. Municipal budgets are a lot more broad-based than private sector budgets, and I think you see that from the material that Jen has just provided to you. If nothing else, the fund accounting as opposed to unified accounting makes them very much different and more broad-based and less singular or less singularly focused, I should say. But that's to be expected, right? Because they mirror that multifunctional purpose that a municipal government has. So when you look at the budget, you should see in that recommendation the strategy for how we're going to achieve the objectives of our residents, which are first and foremost core services, basic services, you know, the stuff that government is really here to do, essential services, police, fire, EMS, and then also overlaying those city council objectives, which may not necessarily be essential, but they're deemed essential by virtue of the consensus that you bring to bear by filtering the constituent sentiment that you take in and distilling it down with direction to us. The process that we use to develop the budget looks at all of these things, and Jen has touched on some of those. I'm looking at the right-hand side of the screen in the yellow box. So we're forecasting, right? Not just financial resources, but trying to understand what the future of the community holds, how needs may be changing, how technology may be affecting what people need, things like that. We're also always considering efficiency and effectiveness, and I have to take this one head on because this is maybe a pet peeve of mine, frankly, that folks, like if you go onto Google AI and you ask, like, well, what's the difference between a government budget and a private business budget? They'll talk about how private businesses are driven by profit motive to be efficient and more efficient than government, right? I'm going to harken back to what I said earlier. The way that, at least at a city, I mean, I'm not a state government person and I'm not a federal government person, but at a city government level, the way that we carve out space to achieve objectives for our community is by being as efficient and effective as we possibly can in providing those basic core services. And that's the only way, at least in this city government, that we have found to carve out space or to free up resources to provide the sort of niceties that people want in their community, like beautification, right? If there's no money for beautification because you spent it all on core services, where else will you get it, right? So I do think that we strive, at least in this city government, to be very efficient. We look at costing and risk management, of course, and also performance monitoring. We always have to be legally and regulatory compliant. That is, of course, essential, and we are in the regulating business, so we want to lead by example, for sure. And we're always, as professionals in public government, or excuse me, in city government, looking at best practices for service delivery. And every one of your business units, whether it's police or human resources or parks and recreation, have robust international and national organizations that have studied and figured out what the best practices are. What's the best, cheapest, most efficient way to deliver the widget, whether the widget is police services or the widget is parks and recreation services. So no different than private business. We also really are mindful, particularly because maybe we're a lean city, but we are mindful as well of those efficiency metrics. So let me tell you what goes on in my head when I'm meeting with department heads. Your city manager must provide a balanced budget. You must adopt a balanced budget by state law. So we are unique in that regard from larger units of government. This is what our process looks like beginning, like I said, end of calendar year and leading up to through the first quarter of the subsequent calendar year, and then being in front of the city council in the second quarter of that calendar year. This is what goes on. So I meet with Jen. We talk a whole lot. We confer regarding outlooks for revenue, our reserves, and our sustainability objectives and benchmarks, which she's already described to you. Directors will sit down and present those requests, typically February, March, as I've said. I review with them not just their requests, but I look at 3 years at least of spending trends with them and ask them questions. Why is this overspent? Why is this underspent? Why didn't you spend it? Why don't we reallocate these monies from whatever it may be, professional services because you don't need them there, to materials and supplies for bulletproof vests, things like that. So probing questions, a full review, and we do that pretty much every year. Then I look at those departmental requests kind of across all the business units, and I try to, sometimes I seek follow-up information, obviously, but I will spread those all and look at those and sort of juxtapose those against the policy priorities of the residents and of the city council as adopted. One other thing I will tell you that I do, and this, I don't know if every city manager does, but I do, is oftentimes I'm problem solving with folks. Like they will bring a suggestion to the table for how to create additional resources for EMS, for instance. And this is a real example from a few years ago where I problem solve with them and I'll say, okay, how can we find a lower cost alternative to bring additional EMS services to bear? And so we explore those concepts and sometimes find least cost alternatives that the department can go back and implement. I'm always taking into account public input we've received from surveys. I sit here every Tuesday with you. I hear every public comment you do, so I always have that in my mind fresh as you do, taking those things into account. Ultimately, all of that comes together to create this comprehensive plan. I'll communicate those decisions back to the directors and to the budget team, and then Jen's amazing budget team compiles all of that into the recommended budget that you're going to receive here in a few weeks. With respect to building the budget, I want to talk a little bit too about sort of the philosophy that I employ here as your city manager and try to instill throughout the organization. So maybe because I do have that other background in the other sector, I have always embraced the notion of an ownership culture. And so, if you're running a business, you're out there and you're trying to instill the sense in every employee that they are an owner. Well, one of the things I really love about government is, at least this is how I view it, I am an owner. I am a shareholder in this municipal corporation. Guess why? Because I paid taxes, and my taxes are part of these revenues that you and the staff are going to look at and figure out how to turn into the maximum possible return on that tax dollar investment to me as an individual, to you as individuals, and to the community collectively. So in our municipal corporation, we believe we have an ownership culture. All of your employees live here, they work here, and they are paying into the system, and they want to maximize the output. These are questions that we talk about. What's the staffing matrix look like? What's the structure of labor? Do we have job redundancies within or across departments? Are we adapting to technology? Are we uptaking technology when it can help us to be more efficient? For example, we're going to be looking at some well, we have looked at already, but we're looking at further AI tools, which is a real innovation opportunity in white-collar work, in my opinion. We look at opportunities for enhancing efficiency. I beat that one to death. We look at what is the life cycle cost, what is preventative maintenance costs. We look at asset management strategies. For me, asset management is a fancy word for fix the roof before it's leaking while the sun is shining, right? Once it's leaking and the sun isn't shining, it's going to cost more to fix it, and you won't have sort of the luxury to maybe make thoughtful decisions and find the best and cheapest way to fix it. So those are the kind of things that we're always couching. And I wanted to follow up a little bit on Councilor Richardson's question on this slide. We do talk a lot about staffing and the cost of labor. Why? Because it's one of our It is our single largest expense, second to capital investment. Some years it is the largest expense if our capital investments are slightly lower in that particular year. We use that zero-based budget that Jen talked about, and we centrally budget for full-time positions, full-time permanent positions. That has not always been the case in this organization, but it's my preference as a city manager to use that approach, and the reason for that is because when we're allocating resources, most of the work we do serves people, and most of the work you must do to serve people has to be done by people. Absent AI, maybe it'll take all of our jobs in a while, but it hasn't yet. So our personnel resources really need to be put toward the priorities of the council and of the community. Every single department head will tell you they could use more help, and they're not wrong, but there's only so much to go around. And so a really important part of my role, as I see it, is to make sure we allocate those resources to the highest priorities. For a department head, the highest priority is their department, and rightly so. But for the bigger picture, it's a little broader perspective. Okay, I think that is my section. And I think Jen's back up here. Any questions for me? Okay.
Councilors? Thank you. Director Wade?
Thank you, Mayor. Diving right back in. So we are going to work in this next series of the slides at maybe getting you ready to start exploring some of those budget publications that are already published, just so you understand not only what you're going to be reviewing, but also the structure of these publications that you'll have before you in just a short little while. So I hope this makes it less daunting and easier, especially for our first-year council members and maybe for some of our longer-term council members who haven't had this type of training. So for our operating funds, let's just say that these are most of our major funds plus the recreation center, because those are the funds that are providing many of the government services that our community members rely on. So when we say our operating funds, I mean the general fund, the recreation center fund, water, wastewater, solid waste, and the new surface water drainage fund. Next slide, please. So for each of these funds, the budget will be discreetly presented. Like the city manager said, that's important because these are separate business units, and they are separate business units that operate with restricted resources. So if you think of them each like a small corporation or a business, that would be a maybe useful way to characterize it, or that jar of money that we don't want to spill over into other operations. So for each of these funds, you're going to see the percentage of the appropriated budget compared to the same fund type. So that'll give you a sense of the magnitude of what you're considering, maybe if you have limited time, where to spend some of that time. You'll get information on the financial position of that fund and the health of those key revenue sources. You'll also get descriptions of those revenue sources. And if you're a first-year council member, I would recommend in particular that you take a close look at the general fund, and that you also become comfortable with the idea of these utility operations that we have and how we derive that revenue and set those rates. You'll see sustainability analysis for each of these funds. So over the 10-year period, how are we doing? How is that structural balance coming along? You'll see results from the previous year and the projections that I'm making for the current year on where we're going to land, both for revenue and expenditures. We'll give you reserve trends. So reserve trends over time, you can see how that's growing. And we'll give you a budgetary summary, or shrinking. In the most recent past, it's been growing, especially in the general fund because of sales and use taxes. You'll see a budgetary summary, our forecast for revenue for the next year, the city manager's recommended expenditures, and you're going to see those in our large funds by division and category. In the general fund, we do that by department, division, and category because it's so large. You'll get information about our authorized full-time positions, so you know what's been approved to date. Detail for all approved supplemental budget items. That's actually a requirement of state statute, as are a couple more of these items. Departmental goals and accomplishments for the current year and next year, and information on capital appropriations. And so there's a lot of information in each fund. What I would recommend if you're using the budget book for the first time is that you not hop around, that you take one fund and look at it in its entirety. Then you'll get used to the structure, and I think from there it's just a lot easier to navigate. Remember that the general fund is the largest fund, and so if you start at the general fund and you're feeling like it's a little bit too large to start with, maybe I'd recommend you go to the water fund and then make your way back to the general fund once you're a little bit more familiar with the format. But the choice is ultimately yours. Next slide. If you would not mind, City Clerk, if we could go back to, we could go to the budget publication online. We're just going to look at pages kind of 20 through 82 together, and this may be a little hitchy, but I think it'll be useful for our council members and the public who may be watching. Great, and let's pull up the adopted budget. Perfect, and let's go to page 20. I think it's page 20. Yes, great. And so I'm going to literally just take you through pretty quickly what this looks like. So we've developed the current budget publication over a period of years to really disclose the information that we as your professional staff members feel are critical to an understanding of the budget. The budget book is prepared for you as policymakers and for the community, and is meant to tell you the entire story. It is not meant to be a summary, and there's a good reason it's not supposed to be a summary. But we realize that it may be a lot of information because there's a lot of information necessary to understand what's going on in our community. Some of the feedback we've gotten from the Budget Advisory Committee is, this is maybe not what we want to use to talk to many members of the public, but as elected policymakers, it's maybe a little bit different. And so we're writing this book in many ways for you and for community members who want this level of detail, which we consider to be the true story. You'll notice the first part of this page is actually the percentage of the general fund budget as comparison to other governmental funds. So from a perspective of magnitude, what you know is when you're reviewing the general fund, you're reviewing 76% of the budgetary appropriations for all governmental type funds. Remember, there are two types of funds: governmental and business type. Those are the only two fund types that the city has, so there's not too much to remember there. From that first section, we'll dive into sustainability and then talk a little bit more about general fund revenue. Next page, please. You'll see the discussion continues, and you'll see some graphs that you can expect to see repeated each year, unless we come up with better ways to do them, that show you the long-term trends for operating revenue and expenditures and total revenue and expenditures in the fund level. So what I'd like to point out for our council members is that the blue and the orange lines on the operating revenue and expenditure chart are our revenue and our expenditures. And I want you to look at how close those lines were first what we see is expenditures were more than revenues from 2014 to 2017 when we did a series of sustainability adjustments, which means reductions in services. From 2017 to 2018 or 19, you see those lines just about equal, really limiting growth. And then you see those lines start to flip. And then you really see, with some of the sales and use tax receipts that we've had recently, the gap between. But those are basically, that excess revenue is creating reserve that we can invest in capital, and that has not been a normal situation for Laramie. And considering the needs of our street infrastructure, something that, in my opinion, is most welcome when we're thinking about the demands of that infrastructure system. So those are some of our sustainability charts that you'll see for each fund. Keep on going. And then what you'll see for the next pages, you'll start to see information on those fund reserves. We'll disclose that to you. Next page. And then you will see the classification of those various reserves, meaning are they unassigned, are they restricted for something? This helps you see if they're available. And then you will see what we call budget summaries, which is how we're funding the budget. So you can see what is revenue, what is reserve, and what the expenditures are. And what you would expect is that the amount of reserves we're using is really funding capital. Next page. In the general fund, you'll notice a significant difference as we spend a lot of time talking about revenue. The reason we do that is because there's a lot of different types of revenue sources that are not in the city's control. A lot of state shared revenue that maybe does have a statutory distribution formula that the city doesn't control, and we want to communicate what that is to the public so that they understand when we talk about like federal mineral royalties or severance taxes that we're only getting a certain percent of it and we're getting a state share of it and it's not ours, and it's a very different type of fund. You're not going to see this amount of disclosure in our water, wastewater, and solid waste funds because the revenue structure is just a lot simpler. And so if you start off in the general fund, don't get deterred by all the revenue information. And I would recommend that you pick a couple of revenue sources here that seem most interesting to you and start to study them because they are important, but it's maybe something to take a piece at a time. If you will, let's go through to page, maybe let's go to the big revenue table, and I'll let you know when. So after lots of information on revenue, we arrive at the forecasted revenue for the budget. So this is the table that you'll expect to see in the budget book that shows you the sources of the revenue in the general fund and the projection for each year of the biennium. Next slide. We'll give you capital revenue sources separately so you know what those are, and then we'll give you revenue by type. We also are giving you trends over time in that beginning revenue section, and so you're going to have lots of information to make your own judgments about the health of these revenue sources, which is what we want you to be able to do. Keep going. Once we're done with revenue, we dive right into budgeted expenditures. And if you go to the next page, the first table you'll see is a chart by department of what those expenditures are, broken down by the major types of expenditures. And so we talked about those definitions earlier. When you see the term personnel, I want you to know what that means. It means all personnel costs inclusive of benefits. Contractual services and materials and supplies, those two items make up the smallest component of our budget of operating costs. Capital project studies and equipment, those are the capital expenditures that we talked about earlier. And debt service, which to me is a capital cost. We're amortizing the cost of capital over a long period of time. Next page. It's a two-page table. It's the general fund. It's the longest. There's a reason I'm showing you this. It's just to decrease the learning curve a little bit and to do that in the fund I consider to be the most complex. It's certainly the most complex to prepare. So I can imagine sitting in your shoes what that feels like as well. So next page. You'll see some overview information for the fund. You'll see authorized positions. Next page. And then you'll see information for each additional request that's going into the budget. So you'll see the narrative that's been provided by the department director that the city manager has approved, and you'll see whether the request is ongoing or one-time funding. If you approve it as one-time funding, the budget team will strip it from the allocation as we're preparing the budget allocation for the next year. Keep on going. So all of these are the detailed requests. You can see every way that the budget is changing in the incrementally budgeted items. Remember that, right? Because that base personnel forecast is being generated from zero every year based on the authorized positions, and you are approving capital items as specific purpose authorizations. And so you literally are seeing in this budget document every way the city government budget is changing. From the big tables, we then in the general fund, and this happens in the general fund only, dive into that department-specific presentation. So you see each division within the department, information for that operation and their goals and accomplishments for the year. So I hope that overview was enough to decrease the learning curve just slightly. What I want you to know is that I'm totally here for you, and the city manager is totally here for you, and that we really are always looking for ways to improve how we're communicating information to you and to the public. Remember, we are doing a budget in brief. This year, it's going to be very different than this publication. It's not even presented by fund, which makes me super uncomfortable as an accountant. However, I think it's actually what the public wants to see. And so we're going to experiment with that. I'm sure we'll learn a lot from that process. But if you're using these documents and something really isn't working for you, I would love that feedback, because this document has been in circulation for a while. We got a lot of positive feedback as we did it, but that doesn't mean that it can't be better. I certainly think it can be. Okay. Are there any questions before we move on to the next section of the presentation? Okay.
I see none. Continue, Director Wade.
Thank you, Mayor. City Clerk, we'll maybe go to the next slide. We just wanted to give you some financial highlights from the adopted budget. So we have a forecasted revenue of about $152.7 million. We used about $45.7 million in reserves, and our adopted budget is $198 million for the biennium. These amounts are exclusive of reappropriations between fiscal periods. So you'll hear us talk about reappropriations are rebudgets. Those are amounts that are encumbered and moved in between periods. We only do reappropriations or encumbrances for capital items. And so we're not like, how you hear about some governments saying, get it encumbered so you don't lose the money. We don't do that in operating. The only space in which we do that is in capital, and that's because you're approving those items as specific purpose authorizations anyway. We don't do it in personnel either. And so I just want to make sure that that's on the table and you all understand that I think governments rightly take a little shade for that practice sometimes, but that actually doesn't happen at the city. And so really when you're looking at this is how we're balancing the budget. Again, to have a balanced budget, those reserves should not be used for your operating costs. They should be used for your capital investment, your one-time investment. We'll talk a little bit more about revenue sources. So remember, and this goes back to that 3%, 5%, whatever that is, for revenue forecasting, the point is your revenue forecast needs to be reliable because it really is setting the limit for each fund. And I don't want to call it the limit for growth. I don't think that's a fair way to say it. But there does seem to be, especially in what has been a historically revenue constricted community like Laramie, there's always additional services that people want. And so as we're considering, as the city manager is considering the growth for those services, that revenue is a constraining factor. And so we want to make sure that we're doing a good job on those revenue forecasts and that we're watching out for the environment of how that revenue may change and that we're not balancing our budget based on unreliable sources of revenue. An example of that might be this. And so as you know, we implemented a new cash management strategy about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. We are earning a lot of interest right now for the city. Not as much as if we invested in equities, but there's no risk, which I think right this week sounds pretty good, actually. And yes, it does, right? And so at the federal treasury rate of 4.1% still, compared to what you earned on the federal treasury rate with what we can invest in like pre-pandemic, that was like 1%. Now it's 4%. So if that's going to go down to 2.8%, and we think long-term it's going to settle at 2.5, I probably want to budget at 2.5 to fund our basic operations. The stuff on top of that, that's probably one-time revenue. So you have to really think about the dynamics of each of those revenue streams and be careful when you're forecasting those budgetary numbers. And so you will see certain types of revenue this year, like investment income and sales and use tax, where I am forecasting at the ongoing amount, not the amount that I expect to be all in. And that is pretty intentional. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about what we see in revenue, just historically for each fund to give you an overview. So these are actuals from 2024. What I want you to know about the general fund is that 80% of the revenue in that fund comes from intergovernmental sources. That means state shared sales and use taxes. It means the 5th cent, local optional tax. It means the direct distribution, lots of different kinds of things. About 14% of the revenue in that fund comes from fines, fees, and franchise taxes, 1% from grants. That's because there's not quite as much major capital as in this fund as has historically been, and 5% from miscellaneous sources. So 80%, that's pretty high exposure to the intergovernmental revenue category. And the chart, the line chart over to my right, your left, depending on how you're looking at it, shows you what really comprises that intergovernmental revenue. And so you'll see the orange line at the top, that's our sales and use taxes. Look at that climb from 2022 to 2024. That's what a lot of our buildup of reserves is about. And I'm going to go into that more when we're in the budgeting cycle, because I know it's causing some public questions, and it should be. But most of this is coming from wind energy development, and the Department of Revenue has repeatedly told us that we should not be relying on this revenue based on the information that they have, and we are trusting that. So treating it as capital, not using it to fund basic government services is what I want you to know as a city council. I also want you to know, look at the rest of the lines on this chart and look at how flat they have been historically. So severance taxes and mineral royalties, although those are significant resources for us, it's $2 million a year. They're flat over time, so they're not growing. So no chance to keep up with inflation there. The direct distribution, what you can basically see is that source, that's the yellow line, that source is derived from over-the-cap collections of mineral royalties and severance taxes. So it is still related to federal mineral royalties and severance taxes. It is still state shared revenue. You can see it declined, and then we've got this sharp uptick. That's because of the legislature and awarding additional funding to local governments, especially starting in 2022 and 2023 after the, or maybe it was 24. 24 was actually the first year. It lagged a little bit. In 2024, they awarded a significant appropriation. It was right around $6 million. We have not seen that. For this biennium, we're sitting at about 4.9. It'll sit there, we think, for this biennium, and then it's likely going to drop down again to what we consider to be our maybe new normal amount of around 3.5 or 3.6 million per year. Next slide. So when we look at the supplemental budget recommendation, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, would you mind going back?
Councilor Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry to interrupt. On the other intergovernmental, could you, I'm sorry, I just didn't catch all of those. So we've got sales and use, severance, direct distribution. What were the other ones you had mentioned?
The other intergovernmental sources is an aggregate of all of the other intergovernmental sources in the general fund. So it would be gas and special fuels tax, cigarette taxes, lottery distributions, lots of different revenue sources. Those are growing, and you'll see in the supplemental budget recommendation that I have forecasted some increases there. Just because those sources actually do tend to keep up with inflation a little bit. And we've had some new sources like the revenue related to lottery and pari-mutuel, I always forget the proper term for that, wagering. And so those are some new sources of revenue for us. They're a little hard to predict because there's not much history.
Councilor O'Doherty.
Hi, Director Wade, when you said the sales and use tax that the state has told you that it's mostly minerals or no, the wind, do they give you a breakdown or they just tell you that? They don't give you a breakdown of what's actually like people buying stuff in Laramie and
Honorable Mayor. Yeah, they do not, they're not forthcoming on data, but they will tell you the sector it's in. And if you look at the Albany County collections by sector, we can reliably forecast that the city's share of both the 4th and 5th cent are about, it's like 29.9% of the countywide collections. And so you can reasonably estimate the amount of the one-time revenue. And that's actually how I am able to infer it. Yeah.
Continue. Thank you.
So as we're looking at 2026, of course, there's an adjustment for property taxes. We were not certain when when we were forecasting for 2026, that would have been a little more than a year ago. So my initial forecast for 2026 was actually lower than what I'm coming back and recommending, just because we weren't sure what that landscape was going to look like. Right now, what we are forecasting is a reduction of about $350,000. That's based on the assessor's latest estimate. Albany County continues to be very lucky because of the result of wind energy development. It is my understanding, based on conversations with the county, that the initially estimated reduction of $800,000 to $1 million has been offset to net to $350,000 because of wind energy development in the area and the increase of other assessed property. And so from our standpoint, that end result of a reduction of $350,000 is certainly more favorable to the city and the community than the initially forecast reduction of $800,000 to $1 million. I think I'm going to forecast that it may be a little bit less than the $350,000 reduction, meaning like $500,000 just in case, because the county assessor is still working on her numbers, and I don't want to over forecast that revenue source. Sales and use taxes, clearly, there's going to be a significant revenue adjustment there. That is for what I expect to be ongoing collections. The good news is that a lot of our key sectors, which for us is retail and online sales, are experiencing continued growth still. And so I'm using those sectors to forecast what I think is going to be ongoing and trying to get within that 3% limit that I talked to you about earlier of what that revenue source is going to be. You all know we've had a significant service delivery model transition in 911 EMS services. And so we have from our consultant what that revenue is going to be, which is within $70,000. It was $70,000 higher than what I initially estimated. And so from a business standpoint, that decision is working out exactly like we expected, actually. And so that's good news for the community. And it's nice working with the consultant to help refine those numbers, because medical billing is new to all of us. And of course, we're going to be doing revenue adjustments for any new capital revenue sources. And so that's the big stuff that is coming your way in the revenue adjustment. And we thought you might be interested in that, because I'm sure you get questions. Next slide. So let's look at the water fund revenue. So remember, water, wastewater, solid waste, those are our user rate funded operations, and I thought you might want to see how the composition of that revenue changes over time. The blue line at the top of the chart are our water charges, and I calculated the percent change of those water charges between 2015 and 2024, which is 16.5%. I also calculated the CPI inflationary factor from that same time period, so if the rates had just kept up with inflation, what would that have looked like? That would have been about a 32% increase. And so the way to interpret that as a city council, in my opinion, is you see grants and loans coming in to really fund the residual between how much costs are going to go up, because they're always going up for us unless we become more efficient or become better ways of doing things, which is always what we're looking at. And so in this fund, we definitely have kept those rates below and well below the CPI inflation for the same time period. You're going to see lots of variability in this fund in capital revenue sources. That's not ever going to go away. So you're going to see wild spikes in those capital revenue sources and really stable user rate revenue and plant investment fees. Next slide. You can see these funds tend to look about the same, with those stable user fee revenue lines and the highly variable capital lines. In the wastewater fund revenue, rates have increased by 16.8%, and of course it's $1.32. So again, we are beating inflation there. In the next fund. This is solid waste. So solid waste is a little bit different. There's more types of user fees. It's not all aggregated. It is separated out by the type of operation: collection, disposal, diversion, and landfill user fees. And so depending on the type of revenue, there can be some variation. And the most variation you're going to see in the landfill is for landfill user fees. And that is because, as you know, the city fully operates the landfill, and landfills have significant capital investment requirements requirements, as well as significant closure and post-closure care liabilities. And the rates in solid waste, rate planning began, I believe, in 2012, so it lagged behind our other funds by a few years. And the area of real rate deficiency, as we started doing these studies, the area of real rate deficiency was in landfill user fees, and so that's why you see those rates go up a lot more over time than you see in the other classes of rates, which are more or less stable. But when I calculate the change in the solid waste charges, it increased 44% between 2015 and 2024 as compared to that 32% increase that would have just been, I don't like to call it just inflationary, but let's use inflation as some kind of benchmark. Let's maybe just agree that that's what we're doing. And it outpaced that because of the significant capital investment necessary for the landfill and those post-closure care liabilities. So interesting to look at the 10-year history of these funds and how that revenue has changed over time. Next slide. So as you're going into the budget, so this is all great. You have lots of numbers, 10-year history. We're giving you a lot of information. But what does it actually mean in terms of if the city is efficient in the use of resources and how we compare to other governments, and how do you answer questions as elected officials about how well the city uses its resources? Those are complicated questions to answer. And one way that we might be able to do that is by looking at the cost of government reports prepared by the Wyoming Department of Audit. And so as a local government, we have to actually submit to the Department of Audit a report, a financial report to them every year by September the 30th, and they compile that information for all local governments across Wyoming and publish that information as a series of legislative reports. I have provided the link to those legislative reports here, but at least we know we're collecting information for Wyoming communities with the same tax structure, for the same fiscal year, for the same categories, because when you start to compare government services, it can become complicated pretty quickly, and I think that's a barrier. But these reports, especially because they're used by our elected officials at the state level, they are a source of information that can be helpful for looking at how Laramie performs in comparison to other communities. So we'll take a look at that briefly before wrapping up this evening. Next slide. So in 2024, I pulled information for the total cost of government in Laramie compared to other cities. This is what was actually expended in the community, not what was budgeted. And you can see where Laramie stacks up. And so Laramie's cost of all government services was at $2,530 per person, which is second from the lowest in comparison to other Wyoming communities, with Casper and Rock Springs being lower than us. And these are not, I should correct myself and say these are not all Wyoming communities, but I picked the communities that I felt were most readily compared to Laramie in some way. But remember that Laramie and Casper are really the only two cities here that I think are full service cities, meaning we provide the full array of government services. An example of what I mean by that is in Gillette, and I'll ask the city manager to correct me here if I'm wrong, because I'm not as familiar as she is with some of these nuances. So in Gillette, the city does not operate the recreation center. They also do not provide EMS services, is that correct? Or fire services. And so when you're looking at the cost of, you have to really think about who are the other full service cities. And really Laramie and Casper are the two that provide the most services. So another way to look at this is we are neck and neck with Casper in providing the most services for some of the lowest cost of total government in the state of Wyoming. Next slide. The first number I showed you was inclusive of capital spending. So for all governments, capital spending included. So if we take out capital spending, because Laramie invested quite a bit last year in capital, how does Laramie's operating cost look? And so if you shake out those numbers, taking out that construction spending, which you can tie directly to the published report, you'll see that Laramie comes in for a full service city at the lowest cost of government in the state. And I don't say that to tell you that I don't think there are ways that we could be more efficient. I agree with the city manager and say that I think you should always look for ways to incrementally improve what you're doing so that the citizens can receive better value for the services you provide. But Laramie historically has been pretty constrained in its level of resources, and we've gotten used to being small and nimble and lean. And I think you see this in this cost of government report, and the Budget Advisory Committee was certainly interested to see this, and I think we'll be talking about this a little bit more, because it's at least a way we can communicate information that everyone has access to and can see that might be a measure of how Laramie compares to other folks in the state who have similar funding structures. And so we thought you might want to see this as you move into, especially some of you considering your first budget recommendation, because that's a pretty big responsibility. That is the last slide for me. I am happy to take any questions you have, and if you have questions for the city manager, I'm sure she'd be happy to respond to.
Councillor Freed?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Director Wade. This is amazing. Every time you talk about the budget and the way we're spending our money, I always feel really good that you're here and our city officers. So I have two specific questions, and if it's better served at our next budget talk, then that's fine. But on slide 27, City Clerk, I don't know if you're willing to go back there. I just specifically, like at the rec center, I just trying to wrap my head around like reserves used versus the biennium budget, just because there's a discrepancy there. Oh, hey, it's on slide 27 of that presentation.
Of the present.
Yeah, the current presentation that we were just on. Yeah, so under the reserves used, it says 23,314 versus like 4.9 in the biennium budget. Can you tell me what that means?
It actually means,
I think I missed it.
It actually means that we are letting that fund balance, the available resources grow in that fund intentionally. As you know, post-pandemic, it was really tough to be operating a recreation center operation. The revenue is really recovering in that fund, and as part of that recovery, we also want to build up a little bit more cash, and so sometimes we will intentionally budget to build up a little cash, and that's what we're doing in this fund.
Awesome. That's
Great
what I
noticing.
thought.
Yeah.
That's great. And then my second question is on the same slideshow on page 31 in one of the graphs. I was just curious too with the Monolith and Bath Ranch where that graph spikes in 2022. I just didn't know if you had any context for city manager today. I was just curious about, obviously that's water fund, and so where there's more operations happening, I'm just curious.
That's a great question. And so you may remember the Bath Ranch acquisition, and then our conversation earlier about these budgeted revenue sources being true inflows of resources. And so that's inflows of resources related to the acquisition of the debt, which happened to be through a loan.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Director Wade.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Bowling?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade. Very similar question, just curious. On slide 33, City Clerk, if you would, the weird spike there in intergovernmental between 18 and 21, is that COVID related? Is that, I'm just curious.
That's a great question. It's construction of a landfill cell. These are revenues. And so, yeah, construction, so we actually got SRF funding to construct a landfill cell. And so, again, those resources in because, and the reason that's important to show is because you're appropriating resources. And so when you look at the expenditure graphs, you're seeing the same thing. So we want to match the revenue and the expenditures, always.
Jen, would you talk a little bit about the time period to accrue the sufficient resources to make that bill? 5-7.
Oh my gosh. It felt like it took at least 5 years, but my memory is a little bit fuzzy, and so if you don't think that seems right, yeah.
Yeah, I think it came a little quicker than we thought, but we usually take 5 to 7 years to accrue enough funding to construct a new cell. And so when Jen talks about the fees that we charge in the solid waste section at the landfill, a whole bunch of that is going to build those new cells out. As we fill up one, we have to build a new one. And the regulatory space around that, you can imagine, is very demanding and very costly for good reason. So, yeah, it takes a long time, and then you get the spike.
Vice Mayor Richardson?
Thank you. And kind of to that point, This is more of a comment. Is that okay?
Comment, I think during
Okay.
discussion.
Okay, thank you.
That it's, during work session, it's good to have both.
Thank you. Thinking about how much time it took to build that up and kind of going back to the legislative session and the amount of discussion amongst legislators about cities having, like, hoarding money and not using it. It's a good opportunity for us if people, note that we have like these huge millions of dollars, to be sure to ask staff what it's there for, because most often there is a long-term purpose.
Absolutely. If I could, Mayor, I'll follow up on that to say, I did have the pleasure, I use that term loosely, of testifying in front of a couple of the committees this session. And one of the things I really appreciated, I get up there, Jen gets up there, and we're kind of geeky, government speaky about building up revenues. But our new WAM director put it so simply. She said, cities do expensive things, right? Think what Jen said. We are tasked with owning, operating, and maintaining hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure in perpetuity for generations, right? And so we do, as Ashley said from WAM, cities do expensive things, and they have to build up money to pay for those expensive things, right? And that was a direct result of discussion amongst legislators about, well, I'm looking at balance sheets, right? A very simple look at a balance sheet says, well, these cities are sitting on tons of money. Well, they are. We're sitting on quite a bit of money right now. But when you look at the fact that it would only fund our street capital investment need for 4 years, right? And still not really address the depreciation curve that we're experiencing, just sort of keep it from nosediving. It can look really simple on a balance sheet. They have plenty of money, but we have to do very expensive things and build up a lot of money to take care of those things.
Well, I just have been taking little notes during this time, and I just have a couple comments. The more that I go through these teachings, the better I understand, and I appreciate the time and the effort that you both put into this. I especially appreciate the pragmatic approach that you have to our finances and the governance of our finances. And I think it shows in the way that you were able to demonstrate the full services that we are able to provide to our community, yet we remain one of the lowest expenditures when we compare ourselves to other communities. And I think it has something to do with that pragmatic approach, the balance that you have between being conservative yet visionary, understanding opportunities such as the Hart Ranch and what that will mean for generations to come, and then using your conservative approach and building money to go toward these visionary projects that make our community better. The other thing that's part of that pragmatism is the proactive approach that you have to things toward our infrastructure, that maintaining it, keeping it up to date, not letting things fall apart, renewing our infrastructure, which was desperately needed. I still think about how we have gone from more than 140 breaks per year down to 40. And that's remarkable, and it'll keep going down. As we get into some of these projects and we realize that we think we have a 6-foot repair and the infrastructure crumbles to the point that it goes on extensively, that tells us that we still have work to do. I appreciate your proactive approach with our capital investment, that you keep up with things. The other thing I appreciate is the systematic approach to balancing our equipment, the maintenance of that equipment, and the need for new equipment to keep us current with the best technology. And I've seen that in Public Works, I've seen that in LPD, and consistently, and in the rec center, we consistently hear that equipment and parts last years longer than anticipated. And so I think that's a testament to the care and the maintenance and that people take with this equipment, that throughout the entire city, we routinely get those reports. Oh, it went 5 years beyond. It went 10 years beyond. I mean, to me, that's amazing, and that's making the best use. So, thank you. I think that the approach really contributes to our sustainability, to our longevity, and to the quality of life that we have in our community, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. And I speak on behalf of the city manager and say we really appreciate those comments. What I would offer just in closing is this, it isn't a coincidence that you see what you see in those cost of government reports. And remember, I'm an accountant trained. I'm a professional accountant, that's my thing. And we talk a lot about internal controls, and the most important piece of that entire framework is the tone at the top. It's the control environment. And none of that happens, none of anything you just said happens without an appropriate tone at the top. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Is everyone okay to continue? Does anyone need a break? All righty. We'll go on to our second work session. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Public comment on this agenda item that we just completed. Okay, seeing none online, now we will continue to our second work session item, which is additional publication options for notices and communications. And Owen, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. For those of you who I have not presented to before, my name is Owen. I'm working in the City Manager's Office, Management Analyst, and PIO, Public Information Officer. What I'm presenting to you tonight is sort of background on what we're doing in terms of public communication. I understand that from the City Manager and from the City Clerk, they've talked to me about your goals and objectives regarding public communications, and it's evident in the goals that you guys adopted earlier this year. So that said, I understand that you guys are maybe looking to sort of expand in our communications department about what we're doing and what we could be doing more of. With that said,
It just looks so short for you. I was trying to be helpful.
it's okay. My standing desk is just as short. So with that said, I'll be presenting first. Our city clerk will be presenting second on more of our legal publications. I'll be talking about more of our community-facing outward stuff that the public interacts with me with. This is our agenda. We'll start with why do we do PR, what we already do, some of our new efforts, legal requirements, and then where you guys would like to go. So why public relations? The first and foremost thing in my mind is it improves brand credibility. So when somebody goes to our Facebook page or gets on our website or sees a press release put out by the Laramie Boomerang on behalf of us, they recognize our logo, our candor, our brand image, and they trust us. It establishes a presence that improves public trust, so that people who might be imitating us online or who are sharing false information, people can easily recognize that that's not coming from us. That's not coming from council. That's not coming from city staff. Secondly, increases visibility and awareness. And so this gains traction among the target audience. You know, sort of how Director Wade was speaking earlier, our target audience is the entire public population of the city of Laramie. The way it was described to me when I was in college was, you know, a government is not like Jeep or Ford, right? You can go and get a Jeep, and the people who are going and buying a Jeep are probably more the outdoorsy type. They're probably looking to go off-road. They're probably looking to go on trails. They're not really cared about your fuel efficiency. They're not really cared about, you know, whether or not you have a third row in your back seat. That said, what this means for the city is that our visibility and awareness, our target audience, we can't go knocking down everybody's door to tell them, hey, come to city council meetings, right? We can't tell them to take our budget survey. We can't tell them to come attend this event. But what we can do is we can create an awareness so that people know that we're out there, know that there's ways to find us and to communicate with us. We encourage public engagement through, you know, press releases, social media, all that sort of stuff. And really what this does is it creates a stronger public connection, right? This is where we want our viewers, our audience to take action. We want them to come to city council meetings. We want them to go to the Community Cleanup Days kickoff event on April 19th, shameless plug. We want them to do all of these things and become a part of the city of Laramie and, you know, share with us whatever they're feeling, whatever they feel they need to communicate. So here's what we're doing in our current media efforts. So if you look at the right side of this table, we'll see that we have our past data from October of 2023 through October of 2024. And our target runs from October as well, 24 to 25. That date is really chosen because that's about the time every year where we give our city manager's yearly report, and then she brings it to you. And so in October, I look at all of our data across all of our social media, across all of our media outlets, and I present that to our city manager. Current, on the very right side, you'll see our achieved numbers. That really should be November 1st of 2024 through March of 2025, through the end of March of 2025. And you can see that even though it's been 5 months since our last data poll, we're actually doing really well in a lot of these numbers. Especially on our social media, we're already over halfway to what I wanted to achieve for 2025. Our press releases have dipped a little bit. However, that +8 number there is additional news that was picked up either by local news sources or state news sources or regional news sources. Like, you know, we posted something on Facebook about the moose out front, and Laramie Boomerang picked it up, talking about a new art piece in town. Radio, the city manager's office pays for a radio spot, an advertisement spot at Hits 106, which is one of Laramie's local radio stations. And they can't tell us exactly how our money is doing in terms of engagement, in terms of actions taken. However, it's estimated that we get about 868,000 impressions annually from our ads that we run there. And so what an impression is somebody took note of it, right? They heard it, they saw it, they took note of it. That doesn't mean they took action on it. That doesn't mean they interacted with it in any way. Doesn't mean they went and visited our website. It just means they took note. On YouTube, our increase in viewership, I'm going to attribute partially to our new planning recap videos and our city council recap videos. Those are getting about 50 views on average per recap, and that's about 20 views on average more than the live streams of our city council and planning commission stuff. And for collaborative sources, really what this means, oh, yeah, absolutely,
Sorry.
Mayor.
Counselor Newman has a
I just have
question.
a comment about the YouTube.
For sure.
That's probably the most comment that I've got since I started sharing them on Facebook.
Yeah.
Is like people actually like to just go watch the 3 to 5 minute video and not
Yeah.
4-hour video or 3-hour
Yep.
video of ours. So I truly appreciate city staff putting that together because they are working.
I'm glad to hear that.
Counselor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Owen. At the end of this, I would love to show you, a friend of mine just sent me something today on what the Fort Collins City Council, have you seen that? Yeah. It makes it so exciting, and it's like, I want to watch their meeting. And so when we're done, I'd like to show you that, if, with your permission, Mayor, because it had me intrigued. So just an idea.
For sure.
For us, okay?
Counselor O'Doherty.
I was hoping for the 6,000 watchers right now, that, because this is so scintillating, I would like you to, if it's okay, Mayor, to just say, I know what you mean by the recaps, the video recaps, but maybe you could say that in case somebody hasn't seen them and now they know it's what it is.
Yeah, of course. So basically, myself, in conjunction with either the city clerk for the city council recap videos, or with our community and economic development department for the planning commission videos, staff will go over each one of those meetings, sort of distill the minutes into a one-page script is what it turns out to be. And then I'll go through, or one of our planners will go through and read the script, and we'll put a presentation over the voiceover. And that way, you know, it sort of has still more of a personal touch to it, while also being informative and sort of distilling the high points from all of our council and planning meetings. And so going forward, I would like to mention, we're not going to be posting every single new video to Facebook like we did last month. We're sort of going to be posting hey, by the way, don't forget that our recap videos are on YouTube. There's Planning Commission's goal is to get them up either the Tuesday or Wednesday after their meeting, and Council's goal is to get it either Wednesday or Thursday after their meeting. So it'll be about a day or two turnaround on any of those videos.
Thank you, Owen. Counselor Newman.
If we see those numbers dropping, would you be okay with revisiting to post them again through Facebook?
Absolutely. And what I saw on our Facebook numbers was that link clicks on the first couple of link shares that we did for each one of those videos, they're pretty high. My goal right now is to drive people to go subscribe to the YouTube channel so they're notified there instead of on Instagram, instead of on Facebook and Instagram. And then that way, you know, we don't have to push all that out, because I'm sure, as you notice, you know, we publish every single city council meeting onto our Facebook page. We announce it prior to the meeting. We don't get good interaction numbers there, and that's just because it's sort of, you know, repetitive and people see it all the time. They know it's happening. My goal is to get to that same point with the recap videos so that we don't have to continue posting it to Facebook. Any other questions before I move on?
Continue, Owen.
Perfect. So for our collaborative resources, really what this is we've looked at different ways to start interacting with either local nonprofits or sort of share ideas and abilities. One good example of this is with the University of Wyoming. The Service Leadership and Community Engagement Department, SLICE, at the University of Wyoming. We're working with them for our Community Cleanup Days kickoff event. And Shelby over there, she has been super great. She's given us resources to get on their mailing lists about certain things. We're on the televisions in the University Union now. And so moving forward, if we're partnered with the University of Wyoming, we can go ahead and advertise our events, our things there. Similarly, we're going to try and, engage certain community partners to search for our youth council member on our newly formed Human Rights and Relations Commission, as that's the only seat that's yet to be filled. And so we'll be reaching out to the high school and the college again, and hopefully, pick up somebody there. So here are some of our professional partners that we work with. Loom Studio, we hired and contracted in late 2020. Really what they are is a PR firm out of Casper, Wyoming, and they manage other sort of municipal or nonprofit entities around Wyoming and help them develop social media strategy, right? And so in late 2022, our social media had sort of taken a dip, and so we hired and contracted with Loom Studios to sort of help us get that back up. And today, we're doing much better, and Loom Studios still helps us with our graphic design for our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter posts. Additionally, we use ZenCity. This is our survey software, is how many of you might know them. So our budget survey, our EAC survey, and our First Street survey that were just out. But what they're really helpful for me on my end is pulling our social media statistics, right? They pull sentiment not only from our own profiles and our own media sources, but from, the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, the Boomerang, Laramie Live, even the Denver Post if they comment on something about us. So what they do is they really just gather a whole bunch of data and feed it to us so that we can tell what's working, what are people talking about, even if they're not talking to us about it. This is our data from our website, from what the city manager sees, city manager's office sees through our website. Our Gym City Spark newsletter is published quarterly. You can see our subscriber count there. That's our mail-out newsletters in addition to our Notify Me newsletters, so people get a little ping in their inbox or in their text messages. Public records requests. Last year, this is January 1st through December 31st of 2024, we had 114. We have currently 289 Newsflash subscribers, and this also counts our press release webpage that we just set up. I'm not sure if many of you are aware, but we've started directly publishing our press releases to our website as well. In case that it doesn't get picked up by media, there's still a spot, there's a repository for the public to go look at and for anybody else to go source if they'd wish. Asking Municipal Government is 21 submissions of last year, and this is really just questions about, website, how do I go pay this, sort of an FAQ, but if it wasn't on our FAQs page already, they can contact city staff. Request tracker is a little bit different. This is, hey, the stormwater drain near my house is full of leaves. I need somebody to clean it. Or, there's been a problem with my water utility. Can somebody come out and inspect it? Somebody vandalized the bathrooms at Washington Park. They need to be cleaned. That's that sort of thing. And then we had 24 ads for special event permits. So these were permits that got pulled and the city advertises them. We also get direct email sometimes, and we will respond to those as those come in. New efforts that we are pursuing right now, like I said, we have press releases hosted on the city website now. That started in January of this year, so anything dating back to January 1st will be on our city website. We've started, working with the Planning Commission more. Additionally, we're in talks with the Board of Health, Laramie Police Advisory Board, and the Traffic Safety Commission to develop, media materials of some kind, whether or not that be videos or flyers or what have you. And finally, you might notice that a lot of city staff has added a URL to the bottom of their emails for Notify Me. And what Notify Me is you can go through and you can click on whether or not you want to be notified by email or by text on any sort of public notice that the city puts out, right? So an agenda that goes out for the Ranch Advisory Commission, or city council's having a meeting tonight. One thing I would like to note about Notify Me is that we have 1,000 available spots for people to sign up with our website contractor. Civic Engage is who that is. We pay for 1,000 spots on Notify Me. It's currently 79% full. It was 98% last year, and we purged a lot of dead accounts, and so we're back down again. But public is still welcome to go and Notify Me, and if we see that number rise, that warrants a discussion for whether or not we should, pay for more Notify Me spots. So, And with that, I will turn it over to the city clerk to talk about legal requirements.
Thank you, Owen.
I just want to say really quick that I appreciate Owen, and I know other managers and directors in the city appreciate the efforts. It's been great to watch him grow as he's started as an intern, and now you see him just flourishing. So tonight, I wanted to just touch base a little bit on legal requirements. We publish several legal ads in the newspaper, and we publish in the Laramie Boomerang. That is the City Council's selected newspaper, as it's really the only local newspaper. And so we send our publications there for ordinances that have been passed, resolutions setting the date, time, and location of the City Council regular meetings. We have budget publications that we're required to publish within a certain time frame. Most of these requirements for these notices are set in state statute, so we are doing these as legally required. Annexations also require a notice. Special meetings require notice. Wyoming Business Council grants and loan applications, bids, RFQs, RFPs, and liquor license applications. There may be more that I haven't included here, but these are the ones we see most often. So in total in 2024, the newspaper said we had 277 legal publications and 38 advertisements that we published with them. So city staff and the clerk's office have worked to develop flyers and additional materials such as city council meeting dates, times, and locations. If you've seen those, I try to email those to you each week. You know, it's something that you could share back out on your Facebook accounts. I don't know how many of you currently do that, but please feel free to send that information back out to the public. That's part of why we create it. We post it on the front door. We also put it inside City Hall at the front there where the agendas are available to the public, and that way there's multiple ways for them to see this. It's also put on Newsflash and stuff, so they can get notifications that way. Boards and commission position availability, those are published in the newspaper, but we also put those on Newsflash. So you've probably seen those, so we're just sending out information to the public saying, hey, we have a Board of Health position available, or Human Rights and Relations Commission, and so that way the community know what boards that we have openings on. Recap videos is a new thing that we've done. I believe it's 4 recap videos we've done for City Council so far to date, and so I believe that is something we're going to continue getting the feedback that we have from everyone on those. So notifications on emails, Owen already talked about articles in the Gem City Spark. And if you haven't read the Gem City Spark, Nancy OP, or Oakland Potter, works with the city manager to publish the Gem City Spark twice a year. They try to include informational articles. It can be, you know, some home safety item, or it could be something that we're working on within the city that they think is important for the community to know about. You were all in the Gem City Spark at some point when you've been elected or re-elected to your positions. We try to put out that type of information too in those. So. And street closure notifications are another form of legal ads that we've been put out either through the public relations information, which is often where that comes from, is through public relations. Public meetings and open house notifications are also sent out. So these 2 charts just kind of gave a little bit of a breakdown of what departments use the legal ads and the advertisements, just in case that was interesting to any of you. We just kind of broke it down. As you can see, the city clerk's office has a large portion of the notifications, and that's because you meet often and you're the governing body, and so as you take actions, we have to keep up with those publications. So that's a lot of where that comes from. So
Next, we have that we share it on Newsflash. We also send some of the notifications to media contacts so that they can also include that in their radio ads or newspaper publications and things like that. We send our legal ads to the legal team at Laramie Boomerang, but there is also a team that is notified for any of these media contact emails, so that if they haven't picked it up in one area, they have another opportunity to find out about it. Agendas are available for all of the city council meetings and boards and commissions at cityoflaramie.org/agenda. If people ask you, hey, what's going on this board, feel free to direct them there. We've tried to make it as easy to remember as possible so that they can get there easily. You know, just type in this one address and they can see every agenda that's out there, minus maybe ones from before 2014. You know, we're still working on some of the backlog for some of the older meetings and stuff, but social media posts are created, of course, by Owen. A lot of times in conjunction with management team, they may come to him and say, hey, we have this topic, can you help us create a flyer or post for this item? And he jumps right on that and gets it back to them as soon as he can. So it's a great resource. Janine, feel free to add anything that you want, but what we're looking for from council tonight is council requested this work session to talk about additional publications and communication efforts. And so we're wondering, you know, what are you hoping to see, and think about like what costs might be associated with the request, and also how much additional staff time might those requests take. So with that, I turn it over to City Manager for any closing remarks, and then back to you, Mayor.
Thank you, City Clerk. Are there any questions or comments at this time?
It's okay, it's okay.
Go ahead, Councilor Lockhart.
Through you, Mayor, thanks to everybody that spoke tonight. I think we're off to a good start myself. I mean, it seems like there's been big improvements since, you know, we took office. So it shows that we've been listened to, so thank you. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback ourselves. I know I have from people just bumping into them in the community. So I don't know what else is out there besides maybe a TikTok video, which I don't watch. So, but other than that, I think we're off to a good start. I would like to, at the end, show you this video because it's pretty exciting, Owen. So, okay, thank you, guys.
Vice Mayor Richardson.
Thank you. I'm curious how much effort it would take to, as seemingly boring as some of the legal notices are, they aren't like the razzle-dazzle, but I think a lot of people feel like they missed it because the boomerang is only a few days. How much work would it take to just put those on social media as well? It doesn't, you know, just, or on the website or somewhere. Oh, are they?
I might as well just talk to you. We have tried to put a lot of our legal notices on Newsflash. They're black and white because honestly, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
You know, so it would be difficult to personalize all of them, although we could maybe work on some format that might pop it out just a little bit more, you know.
And Mayor, through you, Councilor Richardson, you know, that's something that we can absolutely discuss. Part of the reason that I personally don't post the legal notices to Facebook is just because they're not eye-catching, right? It's not things that people necessarily want to know. It's not things that get good interactions on social media. If you look at our Facebook page from even just 2 years ago, a lot of times if we did post a legal ad, it would just be the PDF that we sent over to the boomerang. And that's about as fancy as you can make something like that. And so, you know, when I was hired on and with Loom, our goal was to really grow the social media and make sure that people knew about us, and not to brag, but behind our own police department and then Cheyenne and Casper's police department, our Facebook page is the most popular in Wyoming. Not saying that we have the most followers, but we have the most interactions, the most, consistent impressions made on our community. And so I think that is something to celebrate. But, if we go back to just posting PDFs and legal ads, that can absolutely fall off again.
If I can follow up on that, Mayor, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add to what Owen and Nancy said. We know the reason we focus so much on social media is we know that is what our citizens prefer in terms of how they receive information. You all are Facebook users, you know how prevalent that is in Wyoming with a certain demographic, and then Owen's branched us out into Insta and TikTok and stuff like that. Then if you want to star in a TikTok video, we welcome you to. Don't ask me to. Let me add this, though, too. One of the things that we struggled with as we use, say, Facebook or social media is not drowning out our own message, being really strategic, right? And so food for thought, if we, Owen and I talk about it from time to time. We talked about it this weekend, right? We had some messaging we wanted to get out. We had a certain timeline for it, but we didn't want it to be put out there, pushed out, and be at the top of our feed, so to speak, and drown out a more important message that we were trying to push to get more participation in the budget survey. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into it. And so if we clutter up our feed, I guess, that's what I would call it. Is that the right lingo, Owen? That's something that we always try to think about, too. And I think Owen should brag on it, and he should openly say, like, his work has made us the most popular, cool city Facebook
love it.
page.
Thank you. Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Owen, how about this on those boring legal ads? Maybe make a attractive page once a week, and it has the links to them. So if someone wants to just see them, they just click the link on Facebook, and then it sends them to the city site. That way, you're not advertising, pardon me, the legal ad, but you're making it aware that there are some that they can click to and go see if they like it.
Yeah, for sure. And, along those same lines, we have all of our resolutions and agendas posted. It might be worth looking into, just another web page that we can have all of that as a backlog.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Owen. I love social media. It's like it's a problem. And so, to Councilor Lockhart's Fort Collins video that he's referencing, I actually saw that. It was like 10 o'clock at night. I was scrolling and I was like, oh, I should send this to our city manager, but it was 10 o'clock, so I didn't, and then I forgot about it. But yeah, so I think our city manager answered a question that I had just in terms of what do our residents want to see more of, right? Or like, how do they connect with what we're putting out? And so I really appreciate just the different modalities that we have to get information out to people, right? Like we have the newsletters, we have Laramie Boomerang, we have Facebook, we have all of those things. And so I've really appreciated the social media presence of the city. I think it's consistent. I think I've always wondered where we get the graphic design, because I think that's really good. I run a social media account for my day job, and I'm around young people all the time, and I think it'd be really fun to do, like those fun videos, those kind of silly videos. Again, not to like construe the message, and maybe not all the time, but I'd absolutely be willing to help with one of those.
Thank you, Councilor Vigil. And, that's one of the things that I've been working with our Loom staff on as well, is making things fun. And so we kind of took a step back from that just because I wanted to make sure that we batten down the hatches, so to speak, and make sure that we were getting what needed to be out there in an appropriate manner before we could start sort of branching off and having more fun. But no, I absolutely agree with you. I think, making things more eye-catching is the way to go.
Thank you. Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Owen, and City Clerk. I guess I think it's amazing what we're doing. I really support it, and my question would be like, how how could council help? I know a lot of folks, I see Brandon sharing, or Councilor Newman sharing those YouTube blurbs, and I'm trying to do more of that, but I guess this is just a question to all of us, and maybe to city staff, is what can we do? Is it being a part of videos? Is it posting things? Is it engaging in certain capacities? But that's something I'm really interested in doing. I don't think I have anything to add to what you guys are doing. I think it's really far-reaching and broad, and that's great. But just wondering how I can, as an individual or council member, help you accomplish, the mission of the city. So I guess you don't have to have an answer, but I guess we're here. So if there's anything you think that we can do to help, I know we're all probably willing to do that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Owen. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Janine. And this, I think, speaks a little bit to Councilor Freed's comment just now. And I'm not pretend like I am good at social media at all. I got rid of all of it during the pandemic, but that was mostly for mental health. And I had to get it again during campaigning, reluctantly. So I do need to get better at that. I understand that. But I think to Councilor Freed's point, I think one of the challenges, especially with citywide communications and getting people engaged and interested, is really a knowledge and a visibility of who is your city. A lot of people don't know who our city staff is, or who Owen is and what he does in terms of marketing and PR. But they know all of us because we're the elected representatives, and in many ways I feel like it is our role to actually be spokespeople for you and to assist you on your behalf. So one of the things that just comes to mind, and I know we've spoken about this kind of informally, but when it comes to the recap videos, if it's weekly, like a counselor or a pair of counselors, adding a bumper to the front of it that's straight down the barrel that says, this is Councilor Bowling and Councilor Newman, and we're going to tell you what we did this week, and then we participate in that narrative that goes over. I think that's a way to start that, because we're the visible faces, and I think that we need to take advantage of that. I don't know how that answers these questions. I think there's costs associated with it in terms of additional hours for council people who are stretched thin, probably additional staff time for you as well. But I think there's a way to start that discussion. But I think, and I know I'm getting long-winded here, my larger point is that we need to be acting as your spokespeople, and making sure that we're utilizing that visibility. So.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Newman.
Well, I don't know if Councilor Bowling can see my notes from over there, but shameless plug for Wyotech, I guess, a little bit. But they do something that kind of goes along with what Councilor Bowling just talked about, and it's called Meet the Techer or Meet the Teacher. And I think that would be fantastic for us to do, to get to know some of the city staff, and maybe to get to know some of us a little bit more personal than you guys are the 9 that run the city or run the show up here kind of thing, right? And I think that would help a lot, especially some of the negative stuff that's out there about some of our city staff, who I adore. Shameless plug again. But I think it would help, and it's one of the most watched things on our social media at work, because it is getting to know people at a personal level. I also love the idea of a counselor or a couple counselors helping you guys with the recap video, and I would love to get in on that. So.
Thank you. Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Along Councilor Bowling and Councilor Newman's, and maybe I'm beating a dead horse, but at the Human Being, we do barista spotlights. So anytime we get new baristas and we finally figure they're going to work out, then we get them involved in taking drinks to a nonprofit or an organization. And there's a little questionnaire that they have to fill out to know about them, and I get the most likes on my social media pages from them. So I think it is a good idea, maybe city employee spotlights, and it doesn't have to be real intensive. It's just something quick to show that you're humans and who's running, who's doing all the hard behind the scenes work type stuff.
Yes, of course. And
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
we do something called Rockstar of the Month right now, and so it's somewhat similar to that. But I will agree. When we posted Hunter Dearman, our mosquito guy, putting up lights this last winter, that got much more interactions than just a Rockstar of the Month post. So I completely get where you're coming from.
We get good likes and follows though when we do celebrate our employees, that Rockstar Employee of the Month, yeah.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Richardson. Oh, we'll pause.
Mayor, I was just going to mention that the Vice Mayor and Melanie have both agreed to help with the videos as well. Melanie's currently signed up for the 22nd of May and June 5th. There was an email sent out in March, on March 3rd, and I can resend that out.
Now.
Yeah, yeah, but no, it's okay. We welcome you to participate in that, much like the Planning Commission is doing with staff doing a little blurb at the beginning. We're more than happy to help coordinate council doing a short little snippet at the beginning of the recap or doing the full recap, yeah.
Thank you for adding that, City Clerk. That's helpful. Vice Mayor Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add on to that, I wonder if it would be possible to get a little Google Sheet made so we can sign up, and it makes us a little bit more accountable to the date that we are supposed to be doing that, and then can reach out to you. If it's you, Owen, who we need to schedule with, it's kind of on our radar more. I don't know if that would be helpful to me. I don't know if it would be helpful to others.
It would be to me, so good suggestion. Other, Councilor O'Doherty.
I was thinking along the lines of the recaps and how Mr. Phillips from, is that K-Mix, has invited us to come on and talk about. I'd be uncomfortable as a city councilor going on there, afraid that I might do the thing where I act like I'm speaking for the council when really it's my personal opinion. So I've been reluctant also because I don't really feel like I do a good job, but if we had the recap script, that would give us an opportunity, like, here's what we talked about this week. And I think that's what Mr. Phillips was looking for, is just let us know what's done. He's happy to have us, so that'd be another opportunity to reuse that script.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Mayor. John Phillips does community connections where we have actually time that's available for, and in the past, the mayor and vice mayor used to rotate, going in there once, well, each month, but one month would be the vice mayor, the next month would be the mayor, and it's very helpful. He only gives you about 5 minutes, and it's hard for us to do anything other than just say, here are some of the highlights. By the way, I just want to mention, I just came back from Level. They had an ordinance to prohibit chickens in their town. And of all the things that they've done the last 20 years, that's had the most hits. They call it the chicken fights or the chicken riots. And people go in to see what that discussion, because they're famous for their discussion on the chicken ordinance.
Further comments or questions? Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. City Clerk, I just saw that email again. I found it, so thank you so much for sending that, and I will be responding. So thank you for everything you do for us.
Mayor, if I could,
Yes.
I think we'll go ahead and take the suggestion of the council to create more of a spreadsheet for you that you can just click into, and Owen and I can track that and communicate with you accordingly and stuff. So we'll try to send that out with the reminder email, if that'll work. So it might be tomorrow before we send that out, but we'll make sure to get you that.
Councilor Bowling.
Yeah. I also see that I responded to that email, but then didn't follow up. So my apologies, Nancy. Thank you,
Thank
Mayor,
you.
through you. I apologize. I think also, and this doesn't have to happen here in this work session, but I think the other things I hear from Councilor Lockhart, from Councilor Vigil, and I think we've all seen it, it's just like, it's a general idea of creativity, and there's a lot of creative people on this dais and in this room, and, we can put that mental acuity to use collaboratively in helping you, Owen, in coming up with, cool ideas that are going to make people want to like and subscribe, smash that subscribe button, whatever they say. But thank you again. So.
And I just have a comment or suggestion. It's not exactly related to this, but City Clerk, you and I have talked about getting ceremonies and recognition events that various departments, especially police and fire, have routinely, regularly, getting those invites out to council and on the calendar invites, so that we can attend, because often those are excellent opportunities to engage with the public, to engage with departments, and to give recognition to them, and it expresses our appreciation. And it sometimes is an event where Owen will be there taking photos, so it's a chance to get us out there with the public. And so if we can continue to get those out to council, I think it'll be helpful. Yes, City Clerk.
Along those lines, you may have seen one or two calendar invites so far that say optional at the front. That's kind of what the mayor and I had talked about. And that way, the city council is aware this event is happening, but you're not required to attend. The other part that I would say from a public relations standpoint is we don't always see all the invites that you get for public events. If you take a picture at the event, feel free to send that to Owen and I. So we can maybe use that in some of the public relations materials. I'm also happy to keep that in records because it would help us at the end of the year be able to know how many events the council have attended for community type events and stuff. So it just kind of helps to tally like what you're all doing in the community, so.
That's very helpful. And the other thing I'd like to add to that is, and we have a number of them upcoming, these public town events, the public meeting, such as the First Street meeting. If that can go out as a calendar event, it would help me, because I had to go back and find the email because I didn't really listen that night and take it down. And, so I went, but it took me a little bit of work to get there. And the first place I went was my calendar, and it wasn't there. So, anything else? Owen, thank you very much. I have just seen it makes such a difference to have a dedicated person in that position, and I have just seen it grow, and the reach into the community accelerate since you've been on board and have dedicated your time and expertise to that, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for your presentation.
We don't see it, but you'll be able to hear it.
All right, we are going to
Tuesday in the Fort Collins Council. Council chambers. We bring you an agenda so packed with that. You'll pay nothing for your free seat, but you'll only need the edge. This council meeting has everything. Minutes to approve. Library board reappointments. What about the charter? We're gonna modernize it. Watch this elected group council it out in chambers. 6 p.m., April 1st, council chambers at City Hall, 300 LaPorte Avenue. Attend in person or watch online. You'd be a fool to miss it.
monster truck.
This ad is silly, but seriously, you should tune
Okay.
Catch my attention.
Counselor Freed, that would be hard to miss.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and that was a post of the city of Fort Collins. I think it got like almost like 10,000 likes. Fort Collins is also massive, a lot bigger than Laramie. Also, one of the first comments when I saw it was, "Is this how the city's using our funding?" And I thought that was pretty funny too. So, like I said, there's what we can do and also what our budget has too. But no, I think it's an amazing video.
I think you guys should challenge him to a smackdown.
City manager?
I'm just up here waiting for the next part. Agenda review.
Okay. I need to go to public comment now. Sorry. So is there nothing online? Okay. Then we actually next is our updates. And so Councilor Bowling, are you ready for updates?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'll try and be quick. We had Emergency Planning Commission yesterday at the fairgrounds. We received sort of presentations on 2025 flood predictions, 2025 fire predictions, a presentation from the fire warden on fire restrictions and burn bans in the county, and then also a presentation on the Marshall fire from former LFD firefighter Luke Hawkins, who now works down in Loveland. All of which was just sort of informational to prepare folks for, the upcoming season. The long and short of the flood and weather predictions are there's some extreme drought and low soil moisture down in the southeast part of the state, obviously, and then the rest of the state's pretty on par, not expecting a lot of excitement, and not expecting that there's a huge chance of flooding anywhere in the state. Fire predictions are as per last year as well. All of this can change at a moment's notice, and I think everybody knows that. If a burn ban goes into effect, it'll be stage 1, meaning no open burning your hayfield, no fireworks, things like that. As those PDFs of the presentations become available to me, I will forward them to council. We have rifle range tomorrow, and then I will attend the railroad depot on Thursday.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor. Just before this meeting, I was at the Laramie Public Art Coalition board meeting where we received a tour of High Iron earlier this afternoon, which was great. And that project is just so impactful for so many communities across Wyoming, but I'm really proud to have it here in Laramie. And then I made a mistake last work session by saying that the Human Rights and Relations Commission meeting was that next week. It wasn't. It's actually tomorrow, so my apologies for that. So I'm really excited to get that off and running. And then we have a Laramie Town Gown Association public meeting on Thursday. It's a pretty packed week. Thanks.
Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Your Honor. Our city manager and I have our last meeting on the WAM board on the 24th of April, and I think it's important for us, for Region 1, which is Cheyenne, Laramie, and the communities surrounding that, to get a representative from Laramie on that board. It's a very important board because of all the work that WAM does at the legislature. So I encourage anyone that's interested in doing that to get a hold of either our city manager, myself, or else Ashley Hopstreet, because there will be an election for that. I think the election actually happens in June at the summer conference, but that's an important thing. So I just encourage you to be thinking about that, talking with each other on who can represent our area in Region 1 for the WAM board.
Thank you, Councilor. Counselor O'Doherty.
Counselor Freed subbed for me at the Wyoming Territorial Park Historical Board. He can fill you in on that. I was at the Environmental Advisory Committee last Thursday. Mr. Athey from Tri-Hydro discussed possible locations for monitoring wells. And then the committee put together this waste survey, and Mr. Moen from the city manager's office presented the results. About 300 people took the survey, and people were pretty enthusiastic about recycling and having the options. Of course, it's kind of self-selected because it's people that took the survey, but there was a lot of interest in having recycling in the apartment buildings. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. We had on Thursday, the March 27th, Board of Health. No issues have been identified currently with restaurants in town. The board did have discussion related to the type of public information and engagement they want to put together to present, and they're in the process of discussing where they'll do that and that type of thing. Secondly, on Friday, the 28th, there was the Fire and Police Leadership Course completion ceremony here in Chambers, and I attended that, and it was really exciting. It's the first time that both police and fire have gone through leadership training together, and they found it to be a very positive experience. And to me, I just think they're going through that together. If there were some event where they're both at, having to work with an event, that it will help their leadership and connection. So that was exciting, and I always like to see those. I attended the evening presentation of the First Street parking public meeting, and that was very interesting, and there were probably, were you there? Yeah, I was there, at least about a dozen people attending. I got to meet some very old members of Laramie, and that's always interesting to me, the owners of the Rose Cafe. And so we had a rather lively conversation. But there was a lot of good discussion, and people were really, it was an interactive approach, and people were putting suggestions that they have for the parking, and I read those, and they were excellent types of suggestions. So I thought it was a very positive kind of interaction while I was there, and I know some members were there in the morning. Then on April 7th, yesterday, we had the Housing Coalition, and so this is about our 10th consecutive monthly meeting. We've broken into 5 work groups, and so each work group meets one time during the month in between our meetings. And those groups are project action, regulations, data culture education, that's a big one, and financial, looking at barriers and incentives. And so that's 4 groups. And so we get together and report to one another. The plan is now to continue this group through September. And at the end of September, this group will cease, and a smaller group will rise out of that and begin looking at these various things. And so and anyone is invited if you're interested. It's the second Monday of each month. It's out at LCCC, room 108. And so if you want to just come out and see what's going on, you are welcome. And just upcoming, there's an airport board in the morning. After that, Rocky Mountain Power And then on Thursday, this I want to make sure that I let you all know, Thursday, April 10, is the spring meeting of Town and Gown. And this will be bringing together the entire structure, the executive committee, the steering committee, plus the community players that are important to developing campus community partnerships. The 3 presidents of our higher education institutions will be there. President from UW, WyoTech, LCCC, higher ed staff, and also city staff. So you are invited and welcome to attend, and these, our subgroups, will be reporting on the past year's activities. So it would be a good time for you to see what's going on, and we have done tremendous development and restructuring over the past 2 years. And that's it for me.
What time and where?
Oh, I'm so sorry. The time is 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., Thursday, April 10, LCCC, room 108. And Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. As mentioned, I attended the discussion on the depot lot in First Street as well, and the housing meeting on Monday. I wanted to add to the housing meeting one group of folks that it was noticed that is really missing are those who aren't able to afford a house or don't have a house. So having those voices in the room, if you know of people who would be interested in participating, I think that would be great. I went to the Pilot Hill meeting. They will be starting their trailhead work in May, so coming up right around the corner. And then we'll be holding some celebrations this summer. They haven't quite figured out what that looks like, to celebrate the trailhead, but also to celebrate kind of their years of progress on this. Also went to the Main Street meeting last night. Again, Flavor Fest starts today and goes through the weekend. They've got all sorts of events lined up for it, which is wonderful. That is their biggest thing that they're doing right now, and then they are also just kind of looking at budget planning for the year as they move forward. So that's about it.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor Newman.
Mine's pretty easy. The LCBA board, everything that we talked about, we voted on last week. So saffron and stuff, so not a big update about that. However, they do something pretty cool at their meetings, and kind of halfway through it, they do like a market sector update, and this time it was insurance, and they were talking about how insurance rates will most likely be going up because of the California fires. And at that date, and this is a pretty broad number, but they said the loss in California was anywhere from 25 billion to 75 billion. And what that will do to insurance rates, nobody knows about. They did give me a cool print off, and I'll give it to City Clerk so she can get it out to all you guys, kind of, and it's the different kind of insurances and what has happened in the last quarter. So I'll get that to her, but that's my update.
Very interesting. Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you. Pretty much I attended every meeting on my thing that you were at also, Mayor.
I thought I kept seeing you there.
So I did attend the fire department and LPD leadership graduation, which was a 12-week course. And like you had mentioned, it was the first time the police department had participated. And I think it's fantastic anytime someone's doing something involving in leadership. I did attend the 11 to 1 session of the First Street parking. Very interesting, shared some ideas with different people there, and I did like the comments and whatnot. And I've had a lot of conversations in the last week with individuals downtown that own businesses about parking. So we've got to figure that out. You know? And then also I did attend the Albany County Housing Coalition yesterday, and it's my third meeting, and I'm on the financial restraints breakout of that. And so what we'd like to do is kind of figure out how we can maybe have some meetings with involved parties like LCBA, DDA, Urban Renewal, just to bring up to speed some of these developers. Do they know what's available in funding for them? Because that's a big deal for them. A financial constraint is being able to afford it. So we're gonna put our heads together on that.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I can try to keep us here until 9, so everyone get ready. I'm just kidding. I attended one meeting for Councilor O'Doherty on April 1st, the Territorial Prison. Awesome group of folks. It was really cool. I worked there in 2012 a little bit. The conservation course was fun to be back. But they're getting ready to start being open full-time. I think May 1st is when they're looking to have regular hours for the summer season. But they talked about a lot of really cool things. They're looking at reviewing contracts for people that are renting out the space, changing their POS or point of sale system to get it updated. So just a lot of really cool progressions in some of the systems that these folks are working on. So that was really exciting. Also, last Friday, I attended the Tacos and Margaritas for a Cause for the Laramie firefighters that were injured, along with some other council members and a whole bunch of city staff that I saw there. And it was an amazing event. And so I just wanted to highlight that. I know the city played a big hand, and Assistant City Manager Todd Fieser was there orchestrating quite a bit of this at the Elks Lodge. But tons of community support. I think they said that there was 175 pounds of meat that were eaten at the tacos. That's when I got my tacos, so who knows the final number, but tons of donations from local businesses, from people. I walked away with one of the silent auction prizes, so that was pretty cool. And then this week, I will be attending the Traffic Safety Commission meeting, where hopefully we're going to get some info from Owen, or maybe Owen met with folks and I wasn't there, for maybe a video that the city might be producing for traffic safety coming up, as well as the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. I have a meeting this week, and then Councilor Bowling is going to fill in for me for the Railroad Depot Board meeting. So some stuff coming up this week.
Thank you. And I did want to add that Councilor Bowling and I and Councilor Vigil attended the Wyoming Arts Alliance meeting, which was Monday the 3rd from 10 to 2 p.m. And the focus was looking at art and culture as a sector for economic development in our community, and to begin to get the metrics together that would help to demonstrate that process. So it was a very informative meeting, and I think it's going to go further. So that's it. Now, without further ado, if we can take a look at the agenda. Are there any concerns on the consent agenda?
I don't have a concern, I have a question.
Yes, Councilor Newman.
The 9J, are we just changing who the liaison is? Is that it? Okay. That's all I want to know.
Okay. And if you'll now turn your attention to the regular agenda.
I did. I have another question, I guess, on the regular agenda.
On the consent?
No, regular.
Okay.
Nancy, the email that we received for number 11, is that sufficient, or are we going to have to push this off, or have you not looked at it?
To be honest, Mayor, through you to Councilor Newman, I have not gotten a chance to review this final version that they sent. I'm going to try to do that tomorrow, but I didn't know if either of you have gotten a chance to review it to provide the sponsorship for that. If you feel that you need more time, I'll reach out to them and we can send it to the May 6th agenda.
No, I would sponsor it. I just wanted to make sure that the language was sufficient enough.
We've worked on a few iterations. I haven't gotten a look at this latest one, but I am going to look at it for sure tomorrow.
Okay, just let me know, but yeah, I'll sponsor it.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Mayor, the clerk
Yes.
just advised me there'll be an addition to the consent agenda, just a alcohol permit that needs to be placed before you. Administrative issue.
Yeah. Mayor, for just a small detail, it's Wyoming Ribbon Chop wanting to go into the county for a temporary event. So it'll be on the consent like other ones that we've had. They did submit within 14 days before the date of the event, but we don't have a meeting before the 26th of April, which is when their event is. So that's why we're asking tonight to add it in.
I see no objections. Okay, then that ends our work session.